The second assumption is based on the names we commonly use in Uganda. The name Bemba is drawn from the Babemba. The Babemba are Bantu people of northeastern plateau, the northeastern plateau of Zambia. They are also in the neighboring Zimbabwe and DRC. The Babemba entered Central Africa about 1328 AD, the time Mansa Musa was doing his pilgrimages. This name is shared in central and parts of western Uganda, and according to Buganda oral history, Bemba Musota is the man that was ruling Buganda with the first 5 clans, the clans we know in Buganda as Banasangwao, when Kintu arrived and conquered this small kingdom and expanded it into Buganda as we know it, with another 13 clans, beginning the 700-year history of Buganda kingdom as we know it today. The Banasangwao, for clarity, Banasangwao clans are Fumbe, Lugave, Ngeye, Njaza, and Nyonyinyange. Buganda was then small around the mouth of Nalubale, just about the half of present-day Kyadondo County. Her name at the time was Muwawa. Kintu chased away Bemba. He took his house at Nagalabi in Budo, which is around Kampala. The reason Buganda kings are crowned on that hill to reenact the battle between Kintu and Bemba. The point is, how can a Bantu name from West and Central Africa be shared by the kings of Buganda if it isn't the fact of migrations? Human migration and settlements tend to follow climate and trade routes, and therefore it is easier to find a correlation, often not causation, but a correlation between political organization and the natural environment than many other aspects of human settlements. My assumption is that Buganda kept expanding from the marshlands of the Nile and Lake Victoria, given its sedentary economic life, developing both agriculture and fishing, and becoming stronger than the nomadic groups around it. The reason, the greeting in Luganda is Enyanje Lade, or is the lake where you come from calm. Now, this is what I explained, isn't unlike Northern Europe at the time with the invasion from the north by the Mongols, by the Vikings, further down south into the steppes that stretch more than 6,000 kilometers from a country called Hungary to Mongolia. Both the sea as a means of transport and the horse on land determined how people groups in Europe reacted to these invasions, just like we did in Africa. The migrations from the west in Africa would be joined by other migrants from North Africa, the Nilotics and the Nilo-Hamitic groups from the Nuba Mountains and from Aksum by the year 1300 to 1400. These migrating tribes partly form a mix that we call the Batwezi Empire that adopted the behaviors and cultures of some of the earlier settled people, given the latecomers who are looking for areas in the Great Lakes for crops and for cattle. This is the reason the Bito dynasties that would later produce the kings of Buganda, of Bunyoro, and by extension Toro and Nkore, all revered the Batwezi. Now, you know that you do not revere a thing which you hate. You learn from it. You adopt some of its attributes, and this is what the invading groups from the north did. The invasion left present-day central, western, parts of West Nile, such as the Aluls, the Lugbals, the Lendus, the Kebus, the Kakwas, and the Balis, and these northern groups of the Acholi, the Langis, because the Langis confirmed that they came from Ethiopia. That's what the old men I interviewed many years ago tell me, that their first king settled in Ngeta Hills from Ethiopia. Groups like the Itesos, who are Nilo-Hamitic, the northwestern Tanzania Banyambo, the Wahayas, almost all these fell under one sweep of administrators of the Batwezi Empire. So from around 1200 AD till the empire collapsed about 1450, 3 things remained indelible that really give us the connection of the beginning nucleus of Uganda. First, the introduction of cultivation, especially of millet and coffee as feudal economy, as a feudal economy. How do I know this? Because recently, in an excavation site in Gujarat, in a place called Goji, some seeds of millet were found there that date back thousands of years, and there are no millet seeds in India, so the suspicion is that some of these came by way of trade to India. So number two, the preservation and expansion of the long-horned Egyptian cow. This cow is now called Ankole or Tusi or Nganda cow, but it is much older in resilience against disease, given we see it in murals on walls in the Egyptian pharaohs' palaces about 5,000 years ago. Number three, the smelting, the beginning of some basic smelting of iron to make simple weapons, spears, shields, and build a standing army that conquered many parts of present-day East and Great Lakes, East Africa and the Great Lakes. This economy I described was destroyed by animal and human disease as time went by. Meanwhile, the satellite coastal city-states of Malindi, Mombasa, Pemba, Kilwa, and Zanzibar, which had been trading with India, especially the Gujarat state, like I mentioned, from the first millennia, these states were ransacked and destroyed by the Portuguese from about 1497 onwards. The point to take from this foregoing account I describe is that a nation is not merely an aggregation of people under one territory. It often, as Mackinder says, a uniting idea and an idea that faces competition or external pressure and forges stronger bonds between peoples in order to survive. How societies react to external pressure and cooperate toward of danger pretty much determines how long, how resilient, and how strong that society can be, and if it is able to build after a conflict. We know, for example, France was forced into a nation by the 100-year war with England, and the competing Franks and Goths, just as much as America became an idea of a nation by fighting off the English colonists. They didn't become a nation by simply color or tribe, although this was an underlying element, but they became a nation out of religious and economic persecution that gave them an idea of nationhood. So, in the year 1500 for us in Uganda, what had been left over as leaders after the Batwezi Empire, what were left over as kings after the Batwezi collapse, these were at each other's throats by 1520, as we know. For example, on April 17th, 1520, just about the time Martin Luther began his reformation of the church in East Germany, Prussia, bringing ideas of enlightenment to his people, we know the eclipse of the sun happened on that day. And that made the king of Bunyoro, Olimi Rwitamahanga II, to abandon Nkore, which was under Nyabugarowera at the time. This Rwitamahanga had crushed Nkore and kept it for about 6 months to a year. He had thoroughly conquered it and stayed in for more than a year. Those of you who travel on the road to Kabale, just after Lyantonde, before you enter Mbarara town, Biharwe, on your left-hand side, a very good man, James Tumsime, who owns Igongo, he's put up a monument that tells the story of this 17th of April 1520. You should pass there and see it. This Rwitamahanga from Bunyoro had, prior to this, killed King Nachiminge of Buganda at Mulago. He would go on to Ituri through Rwanda, and he died, it is suspected, in the Kivu area. At about the same time, the Imbangala people, the Umvimbundu people of Kasai region of the DRC, were trading with the Middle Eastern Arabs for ivory, tobacco, gold, guns, and crossing through Lake Tanganyika into Tanzania and connecting with groups from southern Uganda. Now, so this type of feudal raiding, however, disallowed the coalescence of a central uniting idea. And by 1862, when European interest in the hinterland of Africa peaked, we were not united around a common goal. We would not be able to stand together against a common external threat. This underlying weakness would follow us through to modern times as a country. At the time, we had pure feudal economies that would not sustain the growth of science and technology and the defense of our people. This is why by 1893, a company, a mere registered company, led by ex-servicemen, the Imperial British East African Company, which was a franchise of British government led by a Captain Lugard in Nigeria, in Egypt, and Uganda. He would pick up kingdoms and chiefdoms just like insects. Monarchies in South, Central, and Western Uganda, and what they call gerontocracies in the North, in Northwest and the Northeast of the country. He would pick them up easily. In fact, by the end of 1900, a fellow called Major MacDonald had concluded some 30 treaties with groups along the Nile after Buganda signed on March 10th, 1900. So what point do we make here in this very long sweep of history? One, if you do not have a central uniting idea, or let's call it an ideology of unity around common objectives, you cannot fight off invaders, be they of a political, social, economic, or spiritual nature. You do not have the means to resist because cooperation is the beginning of knowledge and understanding and building stronger rafts to sail against enemies. You could ask, but China was invaded, and the British warships sailed up River Yangtze as well as River Ganges in India, even if these nations had a 5,000-year lead on civilization. Well, this is true, but for a slightly different reason. These nations were inward-looking, in my opinion, and they thought, as in the China case, that there was no other power on earth beyond China. The reason it was called the Middle Kingdom. The Chinese emperors believed that between the heavens and the earth, the entire middle is occupied by China. They became inward-looking. They lost the early lead in war technology, which they had developed between 900 and 1000 AD when they invented gunpowder. Number two, that there is nothing new in the world other than leadership and a spirit of thrift, hard work, and unity. History turns so little. It's the reason we repeat mistakes and not learn from them. All the nations we admire and the leaders that exerted themselves had leaders that exerted themselves at particular epochs in history. They drove their people to change. This means, of all the major weaknesses we have to fight off today, it is the weakness of poor organization. I thank you.
Would like to hear from you. Please email us at info@tapmedia.com and visit our website at www.tapmedia.com. You can also visit our offices located at Tomosi Business Park, Luzira, Port Bell Road, or call 0414 220 702. Thank you.